Hey guys, welcome back to another episode for PPE for Dummies. My name is Faiz,
My name's Iche.
And my name is Daniel.
and today we're joined by a guest speaker.
Uh, Hello, everybody. My name is Chiadi Emekwo. I'm in year 13, currently studying A-level economics, history, and law. And I saw these guys with their podcast via LinkedIn, and I just thought it's something I would love to be involved in. Speak about politics, philosophy, economics, current affairs of what's happening around us. And I just feel like I could bring a lot to this podcast, specifically for this episode, and have another point of view. And yeah, I would just like to say thank you for these guys offering me the opportunity to come on here and discuss.
No worries, bro. No worries, no worries.
And
Well,
thank you
what
to you. Oh yeah, thank you to you, Chaddy, for coming on as well. And if anyone else feels like they want to come on and discuss a topic, please feel free to reach out.
feel free, man.
Today we're going to be discussing the topic of conservatism, and
Yeah, it's our politics episode, isn't it?
yeah. So our politics expert Uche is gonna.
I'm not an expert, but okay.
Okay, sorry, but the expert relative to the rest of us is gonna run you through.
That wasn't needed, but okay.
Okay, we're gonna run you through the basics of conservatism.
Yeah, but first we're gonna be having a current affairs section, which we're gonna hopefully have in every politics episode.
Oh yeah, I forgot. My bad. My bad.
Yeah, it's fine. So what are you guys? So what's happening? What's happening in the political climate?
Well, sorry, I just want to introduce myself. What's happening in the climate? I'll just say Rishi Sunak and his, views. I feel like the views that are pushing towards the higher and high upper middle class. For example, trying to get rid of degrees I would say he says are pretty much useless and non-valuable. And I think this is a good discussion because there is a lot of people out there that are doing, well, I would also agree with Rishi Sunak and say they're doing degrees that aren't as useful, but I don't think he should be the one to be able to tell someone that they can't do a degree. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, what do you guys think?
No, I don't think government
Wait,
should
Dan, do
really
you
get.
mind if I take this?
Yeah, no, don't.
Well, to be honest, I think it's wrong to say that a degree is not useful because at the end of the day, a degree is just furthering your study in a certain area. It's not necessarily that a degree should be, oh, you're going to get a good job at the end, which I believe that's what Rishi Sunak takes it as. So it's wrong to say that it's wrong to say that a degree is not useful. It's just choice. So because some people just do things because they want to, and you can't restrict them for doing such things.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I wouldn't say, if I'm being honest, I wouldn't say it's the best move from Sunak because, I mean, I feel like everyone should be able to follow their own passions in terms of their further education because at the end of the day, they're the one paying for it. And I don't think there's any such thing as a useless degree. I mean, of course, statistically, some degrees may not pay off as much as others, but there's no reason for that. That's no reason to actually eliminate them from being studied because that's just honestly, I don't think that's right at all. I don't think that's ethically or morally right. Because I feel like that's kind of imposing on people's freedoms to study what they want and what they're passionate about. You shouldn't really be forced to study certain things just because statistically it's going to pay off higher in the future or you'll contribute more to the economy. I feel like that's more seeing people like they're cogs in a machine just because if I study this certain degree I'll contribute better to society. That's how I think Sunak is basically going about with this, which I don't think is necessarily correct. But I don't know. What do you think, Daniel?
I feel like that kind of thinking would create a more narrow-minded society where we don't get to really explore thinking outside the box because we're gonna be like, oh yeah, we're gonna need this line of thinking and this line of thinking because they're the most quote unquote useful to society in regards to like payout and what they do. But if you limit what we can study education wise, especially since in university you're going to be the one paying it. It's not like the government's providing it for you, like primary and secondary schools. you're going to be the one paying for it, so you should get full autonomy of what you want to study. And I feel like it's that kind of environment that breeds more outward thinking, more diverse thought and more discussion within a society instead of it just being like, oh yeah, everyone studies maths, everyone studies sciences. I don't think that's really right.
Definitely. All right, so moving on to the next current affairs topic. Has anyone got any other things to bring to the table?
I
Uh,
would like to. Sorry, yeah, I would like to just say, keeping on to the education, department and Rishi Sunak. There's been an increase in student maintenance loans by 2.8%, and that's the government confirming that's going to be rising by the time we go to university. And I just feel like, what do you guys think about this? Because obviously now people struggle back to pay their student loans occasionally, and university is not just for people in the higher class, the middle class. It's also for people that are coming from maybe disadvantaged backgrounds. And I feel like increasing the student loan maintenance is gonna cause a problem for people of not privileged backgrounds to be able to pay that off. So I don't know what you guys think about that. And this is another part that Rishi Sunak's trying to change and increase the student loan. Does this have any link towards early promoting degrees, which Rishi Sunak believes is useful?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting take. Does anyone want to take this? Take their opinion on it.
What?
um,
Okay, go on, Daniel.
I feel like that kind of policy is trying to push, really pushes towards the idea that not so much that you should go for a certain degree, but the lower class, is what we would consider, should only push for a certain degree to be able to pay off their student loans, right? So that people of lower class go into something like art or music, which is seen as not to be the best investment in terms of paying back student loans and getting a good job. So it push the lower class into being forced into a certain pathway in order to try and pay it back and pay back their debts, whilst the middle and upper class who can still afford those student loans would still have more liberty into doing what they want. So you could in a way see it as a way to try and try direct and force the lower class.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I mean, to play devil's advocate here, in terms of arguing for this increase in student maintenance loans, because at the end of the day, right, university in of in itself, they're essentially they're private, right? They're their own businesses technically. Of course, what the government invests in them to essentially create academic people to contribute to society through different kinds of jobs. But at the end of the day, in order for them to maximize the amount of money, I mean the amount of benefits that they create within society, you could argue that we should be aiming to put them in the best position to do that. Therefore, I guess that's what the the goal that Sunak is trying to aim for, to essentially improve the benefits of university for the people. So I feel like taking, there's two sides to this argument. You could argue, oh, this is kind of a push for the upper middle classes, because they may be seen as the only people that can afford it. But at the end of the day, you could also argue that this is genuinely just to improve the quality of university, because at the end of the day, universities are very expensive already. 9.25 thousand a year, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, that's just taking it from a different perspective. I mean, if Faiz has nothing else to say, we can move on to another current affairs topic.
I guess just following on from that, like the path of going through university is like socially is kind of changed. Like the availability of options to go through different routes, whether that be through degree apprenticeships where they're funded by the job you're going to, or through like going through just normal apprenticeship routes. Like the popularity of them has increased. So where you've gone on and said that universities are private businesses, and at the end of the day, the business needs to survive. So find the government and the amount of people that end up paying their student loan back isn't a very high number. So the government can't keep funding that, especially due to the climate of the government's budget and things like that, and how finances are in the government. So that it's inevitable that the amount we're paying back would go up because these businesses need to survive and they're like key parts of like UK society.
100%, 100%. Has anyone got any other current affairs they'd like to talk about?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I like.
No, I'd just like to keep it on Rishi for now, and his plans to delay being net zero by 2050 in regards to the UK, because as you may or may not know, the UK, along with other European countries, and other countries around the world have all come together to battle against climate change, that they should go net zero. So pretty much carbon zero by 2050. But Rishi's pushing that back for different reasons, mostly economic reasons, such as giving firms enough time to adapt to those changes. And also he argues that give homeowners times to adapt to those changes as well and lower their costs, but it also has other economic effects on other people, such as people renting and just other people in general. So you guys want to discuss?
What I would say is that this has this has two directions. Obviously, the points you said about why Rishi Sunak is doing this to me are perfect. He wants to give the homeowners a chance. He wants to give the people a chance, the firms a chance, to keep up with it. Because you can't just install a policy overnight, especially when we talk about this whole net zero thing. It's not a very easy policy to implement overnight, and I feel like Rishi Sunak pushing it to 2050 is giving people the chance, to get used to it. Obviously there's going to be some backlash. The people, climate activists, people that are pushing for the laws to be passed or the policy to be passed. However, I don't think it's something that can be passed overnight. And I think the way, I'm not really taking a stance here, but I would say the way Rishi Sunak is taking his time and saying this will still occur. However, it's going to take its time, and it's going to have to, he's given valid reasons to why it may take time. And I think people should actually take a side and, be, wary with him, understand where he's coming from in terms of this situation. I don't know, Faiz, what do you think about this?
Well, picking up on what you've said, from overnight, like 27 years is still a long time to go about like putting these policies in place and seeing a change. So like delaying past 27 years does seem more for his own like self-interest and like the interest of like the economy, which he seems to be care about more rather than the welfare of society.
However, can I just interrupt you there 1 minute, please? Faiz, one thing I would say, right? Because this issue, it's always an issue in politics, right? When you talk about let's call it geopolitics and economic, socioeconomic politics, right? Can I ask you a personal question? Not really a personal question, but can I ask you a question? In society, people are most happy when what? When their economy is stable, when money's coming and their money is worth something. However, we look at like the climate right now. Obviously, arguably the climate's not the best. Climate change is a big thing right now. But at the same time, are people more upset about climate change than they are that the economy is bad? Can you just answer me that question?
Well, I'd say traditionally, yes, that's the case. That people's happiness was linked to this how well the economy was doing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like patterns in society have changed. People are more obsessed with things to do with like the geographical state of the economy they're in, or how like environmental things. Like you see a lot of there's a lot of groups now. Like, what's the name of this? Uche, help me out. What's the name of the group that oil?
Just Stop Oil.
Is it a lot of groups or is it just one?
What are you
group,
talking about?
No, like the
pressure groups. Oh,
different pressure groups. There you go. Yeah. So like, obviously, it's still a minority, but the number is still rising, and over time, it will keep like trends are showing that it will keep rising more and more with the more problems we encounter. So.
You say the numbers are still rising, but I think the numbers of people disagreeing with them is rising even more. So this is where we look at comparisons here. There's more people that disagree with what these Just Stop Oil people are doing then there's more.
But
Then
that's
people agree.
that's going to be the case mathematically, because if you have more people doing it, you're going to have that. There's more access for people to disagree. Like, you can't disagree with nothing. You have to have something there to disagree with.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
If a pressure group didn't exist, you can't disagree with the pressure group because they don't exist.
Agreed.
But if more pressure groups exist, more people can disagree with pressure group X because there's more to disagree with.
Which is true, but I still think
you're looking at it numerically alone when you have to compare like how many pressure groups are there against how many people are disagreeing with them.
It's a fair point, but going back, to the main point, is that people are more happy when the economy is, is thriving, because people's, disposable income, they have more disposable income to spend at the end of the day. If inflation's steady, if inflation's at a good rate, people are going to be more happy. So I don't think people are going to be more happy when, the climate is better, because the average John on the street doesn't actually know if the climate is better. And this is why I feel like before we can talk about climate change, socio-economic and economic politics has to be focused on first. Because
Chaddy, sorry to interrupt, but like that's another traditional view that I understand the standards of living rise when like the economy is thriving. However, in this day and age, the economy thrives. Like the way the economies thrive, a component of that them thriving is to do with like their environmental stance and how sustainable they are. Like we're moving away from a period of time where it's okay to just pour out like masses of carbon emissions. Like, you need to be able to handle your emissions and thrive in a sustainable way for generations to come.
So then what about countries like the UAE and China? They have probably one of the worst, released carbon emissions, but are they not thriving?
Well, countries like China. Is someone trying? Wait, Daniel, are you taking this question, or do you want me to?
I think Faiz, this question's for you because you are releasing the point. Countries like China and the UAE, are they not thriving?
Well,
you look at their carbon emissions.
Yeah, okay.
And you tell me that people, come on.
Oh, you there, mate?
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, countries like China are thriving economically because due to their like large amounts of export-led growth. But if you go into the country like China and ask someone how they're doing, I don't think you'll get a very good response. Their standards of living are so poor compared to the UK.
And then going to the UAE.
But countries like the UAE don't have economies at the scale of like economies like the UK and China. So like managing that is a very different situation.
Well, that's a point where I'd think you would need stats to back it. Really?
I mean, you can go measure the size of like this. Okay, so the size of the UAE economy is, let's see. And someone knows it off by heart. So the size of the UAE economy in GDP was 498 billion in 2023.
Okay.
The UK economy is 2.2 trillion. So like the comparison between the two is like it's a very vast difference between the two of them.
But people are happy there. But yeah, you could argue the UAE, China, and even a nearby country, Germany, are releasing some of the most carbon emissions.
Guys, we're gonna have to wrap this up quickly because this is a current affairs episode, isn't it? But
the world, Faiz. Yeah. So these three countries I've mentioned right now, can you tell me the people? Maybe give me China's instance. Maybe the people aren't happy, but you look at the UAE and Germany, two countries that release one of the the largest carbon emissions out there, with great economies. Can you tell me the people are not happy there?
Wait, Chad, before you even say that, happiness as a thing is really unquantifiable. You can't really measure it. So you saying, are they not happy or are they happy? It's something that you can't really say for certain.
I mean, technically you can because there is a measure.
No, but it's hard.
But there is a measure.
It is hard
to quantify because you need to say, first of all, you need to compare it to something and it needs to be based. It's going to be biased in what you think happiness is or what you think happiness contributes to. So it's hard to measure in an objective way.
I mean, it's measured to it's hard. It's hard to measure in an objective way. But if you look at, because obviously there is a happiness measure. It's called the HDI, right?
HDI, yes.
Human Development Index, I think, or something like that. So obviously, I don't know the statistics. I mean, obviously, it's not necessarily objective, but it gives you a good sense of how to measure it. But, anyways, honestly, I think this debate has gone a bit too far. You know what I'm saying? Because obviously, we need to get to the bulk of the episode. I mean, if anyone has any more, like, we could talk about schools crumbling. I'm sure everyone knows about that. That's essentially just, people accusing Sunak of when he was back as a chancellor for slashing the budget for schools. And that's why there's been so many school collapses that's been happening, and this has affected a lot of people's education, etc. And Sunak, he's not necessarily taking responsibility for it. Quoted by him, he's saying this is completely and utterly untrue by the fact that he slashed the budget for schools. And there's more than 100 schools shut, and he's just being, instead of taking it on the chin and being responsible, taking accountability as our prime minister, he's just getting defensive. So yeah, that's another current affairs thing. I don't know. Does anyone have anything to say about that? If not, we can move on to the bulk of the episode.
No, let's move on.
All right. All right. So today we're gonna be talking about conservatism. So you may, and obviously, wait. Does anyone know what conservatism is before I continue? Because these guys, wait, none of you guys do politics, right? Chad, you don't do politics, right?
No, I don't do politics, but I would say I know my fair amount of politics and philosophy specifically.
Fairs. But yeah. So okay. So what do you guys think conservatism is?
Could I answer this one?
Yeah, sure. You can answer this one.
The way I always look at conservatism, and conservative is the traditional view of taking things, the traditional ideas, traditional commitment to things, and I would say that is what conservatism is. I think anyone that is a conservative, or that follows conservatism, is against change and it is against like anti-progressive. That's where I would see conservatism as a whole.
All right, that's a decent definition. I wouldn't say they're necessarily anti-progress. Well, now it depends on your definition of progressive. I'm assuming when you mean progressive, you mean like radical ideological change, right?
Yeah.
And then in that sense they would be anti progressive. All right, so since Faiz and Daniel, I don't think they know any. I mean, I'm not sure. Do you guys know anything?
I know the bare minimum, I'd say.
What do you know?
Yeah, like pretty much what Shadi said, like the whole idea of conservatism being like keeping traditional ideas and carrying them out through, along those lines.
Oh, Faiz. What about you, Daniel? Is there anything you'd like to add before I continue?
Not really.
All right. Calm. So yeah, it's just like how Chad said. They want to preserve traditional institutions. Well, most strands want to do that. Customs and values, etc. They follow 5 core principles. And we're going to be talking about this throughout this episode. So the first core principle is human imperfection. The second one is about a concept called organic society. The third is tradition. The fourth is pragmatism. And the fifth is paternalism. Okay. So before we get into these core principles, I might as well introduce the different strands we're going to be talking about of conservatism. And by the way, this is a political ideology. So when we're referring to conservatives, we're not talking about MPs within the Conservative Party. We're talking about the political ideology. So just a philosophy about how society should be run, basically. Okay, so the different strands. So we have traditional conservatism, we have one nation conservatism, we have and we also have we also have new right conservatism. And within new right conservatism, we have two branches within that called neoliberalism and neoconservatism. I know there's a lot of conservatism, but we'll get through it. All right, so let's get into the core principles. So essentially, I'm going to explain a core principle, what the different strands think about it, and then just ask you guys what you think. All right, so let's talk about human imperfection. That's the first strand. So essentially, when it comes to human imperfection, let's talk about traditional conservatism first. So they believe that humans are yeah. So most strands of conservatism would believe that humans are deeply flawed. Actually, I would say all conservatives believe that humans are deeply flawed and imperfect in a moral, psychological, and intellectual sense, right? So what do I mean by imperfect? So, in terms of psychological imperfection, we're as humans, we're prone to anxiety, we're prone to fear, we're prone to worry. Humans have we could have like psychological issues, or you know just flaws, right? Like sometimes we can crave security, we cling onto things, right? So that's a type of imperfection. We have moral imperfection, which is more about, we may not have the best sense of what is right or wrong, or we may just not be able to, of course we're able to disaggregate what right and wrong is, but we may not always be able to choose what is right. And we also have intellectual imperfection. We're not the of course smart, we're smart beings, but we're not necessarily perfectly intellectual. Okay, so this is basically what the gist of imperfection is. And in terms of going back onto traditional conservatism, this is essentially why they believe that society shouldn't have too much freedom. Otherwise, it'll collapse on itself, because as humans, we're imperfect, right? Therefore, I guess we wouldn't, like, society shouldn't be too liberal. We shouldn't. Not everyone should be able to have complete autonomy over how they live. So because of that, traditional conservatives believe that the government's function within society is to essentially preserve good order and limit the dangerous freedoms within society. So that's traditional conservatism. So going on to one nation conservatism. So one nation conservatism has a very similar view, in the sense that they do believe humans are imperfect and therefore need guidance and authority. However, they have a more emphasis on the paternalistic state, in which I will talk about further, but essentially just means that they believe that the state has an obligation to act almost in a parental way to its citizens, right? And now let's talk about new right conservatism. Let's specifically talk about neoliberalism, right? So neoliberals are a lot more different, because they have an emphasis on the economy. So they don't really see human imperfection as a bad thing. They believe that it can actually be harnessed as a positive outcome, um, as this can cause free market capitalist innovation. So instead of it being restricted by the government, which other types of conservatives would believe, they believe that personal intellectual ability combined with greed or jealousy is a driver for economic growth. Okay, and then another branch of new right conservatism would be neoconservatism, in which they believe that because humans are imperfect, this means that it is compulsory, it is necessary for us to enforce tradition upon society. So I know, guys, that's a lot to take in. I know that's a lot to take in. If you guys have questions before we get into discussing it, that's fine. So yeah, what do you guys think?
I just have like a question about like the so-called enforcing traditions, because humans are intrinsically imperfect, right? But then it just gets me thinking, like, don't these traditions come from humans themselves? So then wouldn't it make those traditions intrinsically imperfect as well? That's what I'm thinking.
Wait, sorry, could you please repeat that?
No, I was just basically saying that I think it was neo conservatism says that since humans are imperfect, right, we should keep tradition, right? But then don't those traditions come from humans themselves? So then wouldn't that make those traditions imperfect?
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. So essentially, what a neo-conservative. I mean, we're going to talk about tradition in of in itself later. So, okay, I'll come back to that. But I feel like it should be more focused on human imperfection. In fact, actually, let me just think what a conservative think. Right. So there's this traditional conservative thinker called Edmund Burke. and he essentially is quoted to say that tradition kind of sieves out any bad problems that has happened with society in the past. So like essentially tradition is inherited wisdom from the past. So we take out all the bad things that's happened or any bad concepts, etc., that's in the past, and we implement it into the present. That's what tradition is. So I guess what conservatives as a whole would say is that because tradition is essentially has essentially sieved out all the imperfections, because of course as humans we can still make like we can still make quality things, otherwise we wouldn't be here today, would we? However, tradition, it kind of sieves out any flaws within that to the best of its ability, and therefore is the best thing to implement rather than ideological or radical changes, which I that's what I'd say. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does to an extent.
Well,
And
what?
also,
Uh,
also
yeah,
no, it's a different question, more so on what's it called, humans being perfect, right? So since humans are imperfect, that's saying that it would be dangerous to pretty much let people um be autonomous and given to like these kind of imperfect thoughts, because it can create like chaos, anarchy. Like if someone thinks of something like very extreme and radical, right? And that the role of the government is to kind of just keep that in check. But then again, it still goes back on the principle that the government is still made from humans. So then they aren't like the most perfect people to govern such a society, would you say?
yeah, that's 100% a good criticism. So yeah, I'd say conservatives, they do believe that of course everyone is imperfect, including our authority or any authorities in place. But to be fair, now that I think about it, right? Yeah. Because all these principles are linked together, I'm just gonna end up discussing all of them. There's no way I'm gonna only be able to focus on one. But essentially, what they would say about that is, well, it depends on the thinker. But if we're talking about broadly, they would say like having an authority there is better than no authority, essentially. um of course the people in power are going to be imperfect, but because they have the role in society to impose their own to impose, you know, stability or try and maintain order and stability in society, they're not going to be perfect about it, but it's better than no authority whatsoever, because otherwise that will cause actual anarchy, because everyone has these dangerous freedoms. um for example, the traditional conservative Edmund, I'm sorry, not what's his name, Hobbes, right? So he thought of this thought experiment called the state of nature. He believes, so in this thought experiment, he basically explained how um, the worst state in which society could be in is if there was no authority figure, essentially. Um, and this is because everyone has these dangerous freedoms in terms of, you know, they're able to kill, steal, do whatever they want, right? And there's no one maintaining order. So he believes that there should be a sovereign, someone that has ultimate political power to try and basically create this social contract. So essentially taking away these dangerous freedoms from the people, but in return uh, maintaining order and stability. And of course he acknowledges the fact that the actual sovereign isn't may not be perfect in of in itself. However, no sovereign is better. I mean, a bad sovereign is better than no sovereign, he believes. This is because he believes anarchy is the worst thing that could ever happen within society. So I don't know if that kind of, you know, satisfies. I mean, that's what a conservative would say, to be fair.
Would I be allowed to? Obviously, I do know a few bit about Hobbes, you know, the Hobbes theory and stuff. Would I
Mm,
be allowed to like quote a philosopher that has actually critiqued Hobbes theory, and I just want to know your view on it? Would that
yeah,
be
sure.
all right? So I don't know if you lot have heard about John Locke, the English philosopher.
Yeah, yeah, the liberal.
Yeah. So obviously, is Hobbes believes that, you know, a centralized power will, like, benefit society, and like a sovereign power will benefit society. Locke actually criticized that, and he believes that if power is more like dispersed around, you know, society and dispersed around many people, society would be better. What would you say about that?
Yeah, so the thing is, I don't want to take it too like through the liberal route because I'm assuming we're probably gonna have liberalism will probably have its own episode. So it's like I don't want to really like jump to different strands. I mean, different ideologies, if you get what I mean. I don't want to like take away. But to answer your question, I mean, because I'm gonna be explaining the whole conservatives itself. I'm sure Faiz can take this question because I don't wanna like take away too much from the because I could talk about this for ages, right? I don't want to be rambling around about it.
Yeah, I don't
So
understand.
Faiz,
Wait, Charlie, could you repeat the question, please?
So I was just, discussing the view about John Locke, the English philosopher, who actually disagrees with Hobbes's theory that power should be dominated by like a sovereign authority, because John Locke actually believes that power should be, power is more safe when it's, divided or let's say dispersed between, different people in society. Whereas obviously Hobbes believes that it should be centralized to one authority. What would you say
Wait,
about
wait, I'm a bit confused because you said like, unless wait, Uche, if you could clarify, he said like, so Locke is saying like power is safe when it's spread through society, but
Yeah,
sovereignty like a king or queen? Oh my.
yeah,
sovereignty is just the ultimate source of political power. It doesn't have to be a king or queen necessarily.
Okay.
yeah,
It's just a body or figure that has political power. And Locke would basically say that everyone that power should be like dispersed amongst everyone. Like it shouldn't be centralized. Like the individual should have as
Everyone
much
should have
power
equal.
as someone else's, if you get what I mean, of course, he believes in a state. He does believe in a state, but he just believes that the individual is the most important unit within politics.
Well, I guess at the end of the day, his theory is kind of true because the people who govern govern people, govern countries, are and they're people as well. So their power, I don't know, but the idea that everyone has an equal amount of power, I don't think is quite. In theory, it's a brilliant idea, but in actuality, I don't think it's quite what's the word, like achievable due to the
Practical.
fact due to the fact that
Yeah.
like it doesn't make it wouldn't because of everyone because we're all at the end of the day like
Safe.
humans. You have Uche. I'm trying to think and talk at the same time, but yeah, because of the way we are, like due to our human nature, naturally we're gonna try to exercise our power like over one another. So without like the aid of like a state having one central or one person or one body having more power than the other to stop people trying to naturally exercise their power over each other, like you would lead to chaos because how there's no way to like grant everyone equal power. Like you're gonna if we all had equal power in this podcast now, yeah, they're gonna get to a stage where we're gonna have like some sort of impasse, and you're gonna try and exercise your power over me, or I'm gonna try and use my power over you. So at that stage, there's an imbalance of power. So it'd be ideal in theory, but in actuality, I don't think it's a very feasible concept.
oh,
Okay, first,
can I just
that's
say
good
one
answer.
thing before we move on?
Okay, but make it a bit brief, mate. Make it a
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
brief.
it'll be brief because obviously we're saying about power and all of this, exercising the use of your power. Rishi Sunak and telling people that their degrees are useless. You could argue that he is exercising
First,
his power. That's what I'd want to say, just to link it to our current affairs topic.
yeah, that's a nice link. That's a nice link. All right, on to the next concept. I was gonna ask you guys what you thought about the neoliberal view on human imperfection, but I feel like the economic aspect I'm gonna leave a bit later because I feel like that's gonna be because you know I know you guys actually study economics, so it's a bit more to your forte, I guess. So we'll leave that a bit later to the main discussion. All right, so let's talk about the concept of organic society. So the concept of organic society is basically the principle that social cohesion is more important than individual freedom. So what conservatives believe is that an organic society often involves a hierarchy, right? So you know how your body, right? Every part of your body has a different function. Your cells, your organs, your tissues all have different roles within your body. Given that humans are imperfect, not everyone is able to participate in certain roles or functions, for example, decision making. Therefore, there has to be a different classes, there has to be a certain hierarchy within society for there to be order and stability within that. Which I would say is the overall general consensus when it comes to uh, what conservatives believe about society, about an organic society. Except neoliberals, they're not too worried about. They're not very concerned about an organic society because their emphasis is on the economy. And I guess the only big differential between One Nation and traditional conservatism is that One Nation conservatives, they have more of like I said before, they have more of an emphasis on a paternal state. The state being more benevolent, that the state has an obligation to the lower or to the working classes. And I can give an example of Disraeli in the mid 1800s, when he first extended the welfare state within the UK. So, what do you guys think about this concept? Is anyone going to take this? Okay, I'll just pick someone. Chad.
Oh, I think Chad had to go for a couple of minutes, but I think Daniel said he would take a question.
Oh no, it's just that I'm still trying to digest it. And
if you got questions, then because I know it's a lot to take in. I guess
yeah. So you're saying that there has to be a hierarchy within society,
for there to be stability and order. Yeah.
For there to be stability and order. Because
I mean, if you guys have no views on it, I can always just move on. It's not that
there's an example.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think I really have it. No, I was going to say I don't think I have any views on it. Huh?
Yeah, no, to be honest, I think it makes sense, to be honest. Like, naturally, like, for society to operate, I think some form of hierarchy will always be informed. Hierarchy is natural for society to operate.
Yeah.
And it's good society, well, okay, not a good system, but like societies that we see prosper in like different aspects, whether that be like socially, economically, environmentally, they seem to have some kind of hierarchy in place. The degree of the hierarchy is what the question is, I think. Because I think hierarchy is natural. It's just the degree of hierarchy that's up for debate.
Could you argue that obviously hierarchy is, it's needed, arguably, because could you argue society is still survival of the fittest?
No, yeah, that's what we've been saying. Like, hierarchy is natural. Like, hierarchy naturally occurs due to. I think they roots right down to human instinct that hierarchy occurs naturally. Like, I know this is quite a cliche example, but we've read books like Animal Farm, and you see how hierarchy naturally occurs within the book, even after removing this malevolent leader. They've still hierarchy still occurs but it just naturally comes about. People who they say like I can't remember something that took up their residence. Like, it's just a natural thing in society. But the only debate
but does it? Would you, just to play devil's advocate here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that? Okay, of course, it makes sense that a hierarchy does naturally occur.
Yeah.
But conservatives are essentially trying to enforce that it should be maintained in the fact that people shouldn't come out. They shouldn't fall out of their natural placement, essentially.
Within that
hierarchy. So wouldn't you say that kind of limits people's freedoms? And wouldn't you say that even economically, you said, there's hierarchies in there, but if you're limiting people's freedom to move around and try and improve on themselves to maybe climb that hierarchy, enter a different role, right? Wouldn't you say that is bad?
Well, To be fair, yeah, I would disagree with that because at the end of the day, like if you're born into a scenario which isn't favorable, then the suggestion is you're gonna kind of stay within that situation, which isn't the desire, which isn't brilliant. However, if it, like from like a political standpoint, me personally, I'm not as informed on conservatism here, but I would assume that with like I remember, I think when Margaret Thatcher was the prime minister, when she was closing down the mines and talking about incomes, she said she spoke about would she rather have a widened gap, yeah, where the incomes were like wider but lower, or a smaller gap, even though like closing the gap but lower incomes, but like at least everyone as a whole is prospering. Like, I think the aim here is to move everyone up together. Even though some people may still naturally fall to the bottom of that, they're still better off than they were like the next
Wait,
time there was.
what?
No,
Wait. So are you saying? Wait, so are you saying that Thatcher closing down the mines moved up? I mean, as a society innovating, like I guess her goal in that was to, I guess, improve the economy. But I mean, you're saying that they're better off, but really and truly, they weren't better off. I mean, that's a very big driving factor as to why Thatcher was forced to resign.
Could we
Because a lot of miners, because they didn't have any transferable skills into other jobs, they weren't able to, they weren't able to provide for their families because all they knew was mining. And now that Thatcher had closed it down, that caused a lot of uprise.
Yeah, if I
could I
miss what
just
oh yeah, go on.
could I just say something before like we go on to speak about Margaret Thatcher? Could we give a brief view about what Thatcherism is to the audience? Because obviously I think we've just jumped from speaking about what Thatcher's tried doing with her, but could we talk about a bit of Thatcherism and Thatcheronomics so the audience kind of understand what it is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're not going to talk too extensively about the Thatchers, but it is a good topic because she is a conservative. So Thatcherism is literally just the new right conservatism, as I've said. Thatcherism is literally what I talked about, neoconservatism and neoliberalism. She believes in free market economics in the economic sense, but she also believes in enforcing tradition and sticking with traditional customs and values in society. That's basically what Thatcherism is. She's basically the first prime minister to try and implement new right conservatism. So that's why new right conservatism is often coined as Thatcherism. But yeah, I don't know if you guys still want to discuss the mind stuff.
No, I think why I might have missed like the way I said it didn't come across, but I think what I was trying to say was that's her aim was what I've taken from is like her aim was to move everyone within the economy up, like bring everyone up unfortunately the skills of those miners like they became obsolete. They had no jobs. They couldn't transfer into other roles. However, in the long term, like like over a long period of time, where now like you're forcing these miners to go upskill, or like you're forcing their children to go and upskill because their parents know that mining is not a job fit for them anymore, and generate new skills over a longer period of time. Now you have a more skilled economy that overall have moved up. So I think it's about bringing the bottom closer to the top rather than extending the gap and having like your top even greater. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely understand what you're going to say.
Faiz, I would say though, I think the whole Thatcherism thing, if we look at Thatcherism and her time as PM, really she was trying to implement a form of trickle-down economics, funding the rich or almost making it easier for the rich to acquire wealth, believing that it would go down to the lower class. And I think that is actually what, Thatcherism, Thatcher economics or Thatcherism or Thatcheronomics was actually trying to do, if we look at it. And obviously it failed because economists out there have said that trickle-down economics will never work in society.
No. You can't say it's failed necessarily. it's not. It's not necessarily that it failed. It's like,
It's just
I mean,
the extent.
a lot of people would say that Thatcher was successful economically.
Mhm.
But I don't think it's right to say whether or not it was successful. It failed. It just happened, right?
Yeah,
Um, but in terms of Faiz's mining, about in the long term, I would actually disagree. I mean, of course, as a whole, I guess in the very long term, as in a lot of years down the line, people aren't mining anymore, because she shut them down, and obviously they have to go into other types of jobs, right? Fair enough, but at the end of the day, people were affected at the time, and a lot of people weren't even able to recover from that. You know what hysteresis is, right? um you know at the time there wasn't enough, or there wasn't as good enough education, or it wasn't as easy to skill up at the time, to enter other fields of work, because at the end of the day all they knew how to do was mine. And of course a lot of people were affected by this, and it caused a lot of poverty. And I would say definitely at the time it definitely widened the gap actually. But yeah, I mean, uh, do you have anything else to say? Because I'm gonna just
Just
move on to the yeah. Sorry,
just to
what?
conclude that, like, just to like come back on what you said, but I feel like when it comes to like bringing about change, you need a problem to like problems need to occur, like, or problems tend to occur before change happens, and like, to be honest, in the worst way, like in the best way possible, sorry, somebody's got to do like the dirty work, and it was Margaret Thatcher. Like, at the end of the day, it was either she shut down the mines, or like one way or another, the whole market, like mine, labor market for mining was going to collapse one way or another, because especially with how technology is today. So, like, and that's years down the line. So, one way or another, it was bound to collapse. But it's just she took the start. She took the step forward to close, like collapse the market herself, and then at the time, yeah, very fair enough. It wasn't very favorable because it caused poverty, put people out of jobs, and it was hard to upskill. But it brought about solutions to that problem for future generations. Because now look at it. Let's say some other markets for labor start to like collapse and fall. It will be easier for those people to upskill now. So because of the problems of the past, we have a solution for the future.
Just to, I definitely hear what you're saying. Um, but I'd say, yeah, I definitely agree with the fact that from a purely economic sense, then yeah, 100%. She definitely, she saw the inefficiencies within the coal mining industry, and she shut it down, right? I 100% agree, but I feel like that kind of takes away from the whole argument here that, you know, about organic society, about how you were saying that she, through shutting down the mines, she brought the lower class, I mean, not sorry, the working class up, right? But I mean, fair enough. In the future, the economy in itself, yeah, has grown, and I guess you could argue that her shutting down the coal mining industry did contribute to that. But at the end of the day, it hasn't necessarily improved. It hasn't necessarily brought the. It hasn't necessarily what's it called, decreased the gap in terms of uh the upper middle class and the working class. It hasn't necessarily done that. It has enriched the economy in the long term, definitely, but that specific move did not necessarily decrease that gap. Many would argue it would actually increase it. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say, right? From a numbers point of view, 100% the economy did grow, but if you look at how it was distributed, especially, Chad was talking about trickle down economics, how it was distributed through her economic policy, it definitely did not decrease the gap, I would say. But
It
yeah.
definitely didn't, and this is why economists have come out there and explained the theory, or the policy of trickle down economics. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in the sense of closing the gap, like Uche said. Maybe it works in boosting the economy, but it doesn't work on closing the gap. And this is also an instance when I'm back in actually the same time period when Reagan was ruling America in office. He tried the same thing with trickle down economics, and some may say it boosted the economy, but it failed to close the gap.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, does anyone have anything else to say before I move on to the next core principle?
I think you can move on.
So the next core principle is about pragmatism. All right, so what pragmatism basically is the belief that you should approach decisions situationally, right? Decisions should be made realistically and not idealistically. You should have a flexible viewpoint when trying to solve problems. So this kind of contrasts with the liberal view that humans are rational. We're able to make idealistic societies and implement them fine. Whereas conservatives would argue that um, ideological thinking and solutions is not good. That's why a lot of conservatives don't like the idea of the free market because it's an ideological view. And this is where neoliberals definitely disagree with pragmatism because the whole idea of neoliberalism is based on abstract concepts. So what do you guys think about the fact that, like, what do you guys think about that? Like, do you guys think that humans are able to think of abstract concepts and then implement them within society, or do you take the more conservative view in which you think uh, changes should be made more pragmatically?
Um, I would say that it's because of that kind of ideological thinking that what's it called, as a society we can really move forward and make like big changes. Because I feel like without that like radical and ideological thinking, a lot of the things that we see today wouldn't have happened, either wouldn't have happened at all or wouldn't have happened like as quickly and as rapidly.
Or have you got an example to back that up?
I can't think of something like off the top of my head, but it's just like even in response to like, let's say, actually, wait, no, give me some time to think.
Well done. You're thinking of of an example. Faiz, have you got anything to say about that?
Well, so I feel like so wait, is it the conservatives that believe that we should take like a more flexible, practical approach on situations? Then the opposite is, oh, we can have like freedom of thought and just try like different things. Hello?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. So conservatives believe, yeah, that we should be more realistic about things. We should be flexible but realistic. Whereas the opposite or more liberal view would be that we can make ideological changes because humans are rational, and we can make ideological things, and it would go fine. It would function like fine.
Well, see, I kind of stand in between the two because I feel like we'll
Pick
make
a side,
like
mate.
let me just,
No, I'm
where I
joking. You don't have to pick a side. Just say what you want to say.
where I stand is I believe that it would be wrong to say we should take like practical approaches to everything because a lot of situations require thinking that is more extensive and more in depth. However, I think that is solved by the fact that we're actually more irrational than rational, and our thoughts can we have that freedom of thought and that ability to think of so many different things as humans allows us to generate like different ideologies and try them. And of course, some may fail, some may, and then, but out of some, even though some may fail, there's one that prospers, and then we've generated a new way of thinking and a new way of behaving as humans. Like, even it's again, it's down back to human nature. Like, actually, that's my biological terms aren't great, but one of the primates are the ones that survived only because even though they weren't as fit, they weren't as strong, they still went out because they went out and ventured and explored. They ended up surviving because they adapted and they were able to find new ways of doing things. And I think that's followed through human behavior throughout the whole like throughout millions of years. And even today, the way humans are able to think irrationally and think in some ways, some people like I might say is
Wait,
absurd.
sorry. Are you meaning to say irrationally?
Yeah, I did. Have I been saying I have been saying irrationally, I believe.
But sorry, I don't understand. Like, why is that a good thing?
Yeah, I really don't understand it as well.
So if we're able to think in such like a complex and like like for lack of a better word, crazy way, yeah, we're gonna come up with things that seem absurd and seem like obscure and like some people would class as obscene. However, these obscure and obscene things are things that when they were tried and tested, some turn out to be some of like the best things. Like you
Have you got an example of this? Because what I'm okay. Let me just tell you. Like, let me just explain what I think you're trying to say. So you're saying because humans are irrational, right?
Yeah.
And we can think of all these different types of things that that can kind of like break the norm, but then we can try and test them and they can be a better solution. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So, like, okay, I understand that, but I mean, if you could give me some examples of where this has even been the case, also the fact that, like, many conservatives would believe that this is not the case because try and testing, like, as you said, crazy ideas that could be really bad for society, right? That could be extremely bad. It may seem good in theory, but in a practical sense, if we implement that into society, then it's not going to be good at all. And of course, because as you said, humans are irrational in your view, right? That means that we're going to make solutions that inevitably aren't going to be good for society. So what's the point of doing that when we can literally just look in the past, see what has worked, and implement only that in society instead of thinking about things that break the norm? Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Well, I have like an example that I think would be relevant, but I'm not too sure. But like, what's it called in regards to like what's it called that kind of extensive thinking and thinking that may go against what we view as the norm. I would like look towards like scientific discoveries, right? Because obviously the field of science is something that's always evolving, something that's always growing, right? And it's always growing and evolving because of how we humans think and how we tend to think against the norm or think, okay, why does this happen? Why does this phenomenon happen? With different experiments and all of that, right? And even some of the greatest thinkers in the world, right? Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, and other great scientists, when they first published that work, right? A lot of people do criticize it and go against it because what they've discovered or what they've written about and what they're trying to tell other people about goes against societal norms, right? But then it's only later down the line that we find that okay, maybe they were right in this instance, and then we start using their theories and applications to what's it called to create new inventions and new things that do bring us practical use. So then the inventions that we make from their knowledge came from a place of almost irrationality of going against the norm or not being as practical.
By the way, guys, we're kind of using rationality wrongly here. But
Wait,
anyways,
Yeah,
yeah,
I feel that as well.
100%, 100% agree. In terms of scientific discovery. Oh, by the way, guys, I'm not conservative. I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm not. There's not me. I'm just,
So
But
if you're
anyways,
Are
conservative,
you?
what are you, mate?
no, I'm not.
Yeah,
But
what are you then if
there's
you're not
nothing. I mean,
conservative?
there's nothing. I don't. You know what?
Yeah,
Never
yeah,
mind.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah,
Anyways, so yeah,
yeah.
so I 100% agree in terms of scientific discovery. Of course, we're gonna have to break. We're gonna have to go against societal norms. But in terms of in a political sense, do you think it's really worth the risk of going against the norms instead of just going with what has already worked? Because scientific discoveries, right? Um, Scientific discoveries, for example, the theory of evolution, many people didn't necessarily believe it at the time, and that didn't really govern how how we lived. Right now that it's accepted, it still doesn't govern how we live.
Listen,
How
Uche.
whereas whereas when you break against the norms in terms of in a political sense, in which you implement a certain type of society that goes against tradition, then that's where it gets a bit dangerous. Do you get what I'm trying
Listen,
to say?
I
listen,
feel
Uche.
like
I,
uh,
I want to say, right. I think what happens within like this conversation. I think you probably digging yourself a hole. You know, overlapping science and almost political philosophy. I think when you start overlapping political philosophy and science, I think you dig yourself a hole because they are two actually very different things. Just before you continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Faiz, what are you gonna say?
yeah. So I wanted to say that I feel like conserved thought and keeping tradition is what makes you more like not okay, like metaphorically speaking, prone to attack. Because if you keep the same ways of doing things and keep to the same structure and like that rigid, like just that same way of doing things. When something occurs that change, like a change, an external change that occurs, or something that wasn't expected happens, you're not ready for that, and then you have to break down and rebuild again. Whereas if you have these constantly developing ideas, and then obviously like the one I understand your point about what's the point of testing these ideas that fail and then have a worse effect for society. But in my opinion, these ideas won't go very far if they're not very good. Like if they're good ideas or they're practical or they're ideas that are promising, they will start to grow and expand and like gain attention. But if they're not, then they will die very quickly. It's that idea of survival of the fittest. Like it follows it with ideas like these ideas that are good and fit for how we want to live. They will survive.
Wait, so sorry, are you disagreeing with conservatives or not? Because
I don't really necessarily understand what Faiz is saying. I don't...
sorry. Are you disagreeing with what conservatives are saying or not?
I think just that whole idea of being pragmatic, I think, is what I'm like challenging at this point.
Because you're saying that survival of the fittest of ideas, right? That's what you're saying. But that's literally what conservatives are trying to say, right? Like they're trying to say that you're trying to. Sorry, what?
Like, they've looked at like previous history and said this has worked. Let's keep with it.
Yeah, this has worked. Let's keep with it. Previous history, historical ideas, right?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like this has worked. Let's keep with it. Doesn't like keep you going for the future, because the future isn't going to like. No, if you've had a good span of 50 years, yeah, of just of a good political climate over 50 years, everything's been smooth running, yeah. Then on year 51, like there's just complete like disruption throughout the whole world politically, and your political system is not fit for it. But I'm saying if you have a situation where you have a situation where you're constantly developing ideas and they're being like, if they're I don't know how you would test them as such, but
yeah, but exactly that's where the issue is. How would you test them? As in, are you saying, we should do like a trial and test within society of how, because at that point, if you're constantly changing the way society works simply due to trying to find the best idea, which I mean, I don't know if no one knows if there even is a best idea. Like, wouldn't you say that's just ultimately going to harm society, and therefore you should just stick with what has worked in the past?
Well, the cliche saying of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger is like perfectly.
But the thing is, it would kill you.
I don't think,
honestly, it would.
Like some ideas would. I mean, of course, some wouldn't, but ultimately, some would. Right? We don't know.
Uche, can I bring in like a topic like this? Is a serious topic here, right? You look at Brexit, okay? We look at Brexit. People want, people wanted to change. They wanted Brexit, and obviously the people wanted it, and now Brexit happened. And obviously Faiz was talking about, which I really disagree with. He was talking about how, if it doesn't work, it's gonna fade away. Has Brexit faded away? And arguably, people said Brexit has made, England worse. It's made its economy worse.
Brexit isn't like a political ideology or like a
but it's not. It's not a political change. It's a political change which has been influenced on political ideology.
Yeah, but
realistically,
but exactly. But so now Brexit occurred, which wasn't something that so when who was the Prime Minister? David Cameron, I believe. David Cameron was Prime Minister at the time.
Yeah.
He put the referendum in place, expecting people to vote Remain. Then he ended up voting Leave, and he wasn't. No one was ready for that, so he ended up resigning. And if I'm correct, what's her name again?
Theresa May.
But what's your point?
No, I'm saying like, so the ideas that we thought we had were fine, and we had this external, like this situation which we believed would have one outcome, but ended up taking another.
No, but you've contradicted
Wait,
yourself.
Wait.
I'm
Can I say
saying
something?
that traditional idea was now.
Faiz as well, right? Listen to this.
Wait. So,
Can
right,
I
if,
say
it's a bit of a. Well, sorry, Danny. Let me just say, and then you can speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a contradiction because you're saying that we're sticking with what we've known, but it's gone wrong when it comes to Brexit. But the whole point was that we did not stick with what we know, what we knew. The whole reason why David Cameron wanted to stay is because he was trying to like.
But that's okay. Because okay, with the referendum, there was a debate about it, and there was a debate. Oh, should we stay? Should we leave? Yeah, and he's put it to because of the way the UK works. He has to put it towards the people that live in the UK because of that. It's a democracy. So, well, what they as I mentioned before, what they expected was, oh yeah, we're gonna vote Remain because we're gonna stick to what we know. Is what I'm trying to say.
But what's your point though?
Yeah, but I'm saying so now that the outcome was we voted Leave, which was an unexpected event. Yeah, it challenged the way it caused turmoil amongst the political state of the UK.
But are you literally arguing that we should not
that
stick
traditional thought was challenged and caused turmoil?
But the traditional thought didn't cause turmoil. You're contradicting yourself.
And Faiz as well. Can I actually because you're saying a lot of things.
Wait.
Actually, if you look at the percentage, right? Which party actually wanted, bro? Which party actually wanted?
Whoa, wait. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. Okay. I think we need to organize this a bit more because this is going a bit.
Okay, but hold on. Faiz, which party actually, if you look at percentages, voted out for Brexit? It was the Conservatives. This is where your point just doesn't really add up to me.
No,
wait. What do you mean voted out?
Because it's the people
voted to leave.
No, Conservatives wanted to stay.
No. If you look at the percentages, right, I can actually get them out for you. The exact percentage of Conservatives, right, that voted to leave, right.
No, as in, I know they voted to leave, but as in the only reason they voted to leave was because of their constituencies. They were just trying to reflect the view of their constituencies. Because the people wanted to leave, that's why they stuck. But I'm talking about they generally wanted to remain, but they're just going with what their constituencies wanted.
And why are they going to know what their constituency say?
Because that's their role.
Because is it because that's their role? Because they're sticking to what they know because they're Conservatives. Like the whole
but they wanted but if you, I mean, I don't know, man. I don't have a view on that. Sorry, Daniel. I'm sorry. We've been cutting you off. I'm sorry. You can speak. No one interrupt Daniel. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. I was just gonna say that with the whole idea of pragmatism, because this is what the discussion's on. I was thinking one of the downsides to it is that when you are faced with a problem that you haven't dealt with before, like a problem you haven't really dealt with in the past, isn't pragmatism a slow way of dealing with that problem? Since you're going to try and go to past knowledge, but then since it's a new event, since it's something that's new and there's no past knowledge of it, it'll be quite inefficient. And I was trying to link that towards Brexit, that Brexit isn't something that's really happened before, which is why I feel like it was dealt with really poorly, because in a way we kind of didn't know what we were doing, but we're still trying to stick to old ways, if that makes sense.
But sorry, I don't know if you guys know what Brexit is, because the whole point of it, the whole thing was that we didn't stick to the EU bloc. The whole thing was that people decided to leave, which kind of went against what we traditionally were in. So I don't really understand I don't understand you guys' point. I don't know if it's me.
But even with the whole EU bloc thing, it's not like we were always in the EU bloc.
I know, but the whole Brexit thing wasn't to counter what Uchi's been saying. It was to counter what Faiz was saying, because Faiz was pretty much, to me, contradicting himself.
How?
So that's why I brought the Brexit thing in.
Wait, can you explain to me, Chaddy, how I was contradicting myself?
Because you were talking about irrationality or rationality. To me, at the time when you were saying it, the time what Uchi was saying, to me, it didn't add up.
No, right now, I'm saying, going off what Daniel said, if we're looking at past event history,
just playing devil's advocate, guys. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, we're looking at past history. to deal with a new event which hasn't occurred is an ineffective way of doing things, right? Which is the point I've been putting across. And I said instead of, which is what's different from Daniel's, is if we have these like let's say trial and error kind of approach, yeah, like at least something should be able to deal with the way, like deal with these new problems that occur, or like be as suitable for these new problems that we're going to encounter.
Sorry, but
So
okay,
what are you trying to say, Faiz, at the end?
no, I understand what he's trying to say. He's basically trying to say,
No,
that-
Uche, this was more like directed at Shadi. Sorry to cut you off.
oh, sorry, my bad.
Like, I wanted to challenge his way of thinking.
Yeah, you're challenging my way of thinking, but I don't actually understand your end goal and what you're trying to say.
Oh,
Would you like me to explain like what he's trying to say? Like, I'm not gonna say my opinion, Faiz. I'm just gonna like explain.
Yeah, go on.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but Faiz is basically trying to say that in terms of if we can't necessarily, it's not the most efficient thing to look into past data and implement that into things of the present, especially when new things occur, right? Is that what you're trying to say? Like, it's not the best way to deal with new problems because we just haven't dealt with it and we don't have the past data to necessarily deal with it. And therefore, you're basically trying to say that we should take a more trial and test approach in order to create the most efficient way out. So yeah, what do you have to say to that, Chad?
Oh, in terms of that, listen. I think the way she's probably explained it, it makes more sense to me what he's trying to say. However, I feel like obviously
that's the same way I've been saying it for like the last 20 minutes.
I don't know, because the whole irrationality thing wasn't adding up to me. It wasn't making sense.
I mean, I still disagree, right? I still disagree.
Okay,
and
let me. But you've understood, right?
I've understood what he's actually trying to say. His end point trying to say is that we need to, like, humanity's changing, the world's changing. We need to have trial and error, to have a good society, right? That's what you're trying to say.
No.
So what are you trying to say?
I'm not saying okay. People are changing. Wait, firstly, you're saying humanity and people are changing. That's a given anyway. Like,
wait,
I don't know where that became a thing, but he mentioned.
What are you trying to say? Like, there was the new issues arising because things, are changing. And things have changed in the present.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is what you said, right? What I'm saying. Uche, what I'm saying is,
sorry, this is getting a bit disorganized. I'm sorry.
No, but it's a good debate. It's
definitely a good debate, but it just needs to be a bit more organized.
Uche, what you're saying is what I'm saying, right? But Faiz is now disagreeing with both of us.
I mean, okay, you know what it is? You're not being specific enough about what Faiz is saying. It's not necessarily just that things are changing. It's just that we may not have the past data to back up new problems that occur.
Okay, that's true, yeah.
All right. So let me just explain why I think there's. Well, okay, not why I think. Let me just counter argue or play devil's advocate, right? So in terms of your, we may not have past data. I 100% agree. 100% agree. We may not have past data, but I feel like, if tradition cannot be enforced, then obviously we're not going to enforce it, are we? If there's no way to enforce it, that's why I feel like this Brexit example isn't the best, because traditionally we have been in the EU bloc. I know Daniel said before, okay, we haven't always been in the EU bloc. Yeah, of course we haven't, but the actual change, the actual decision to join the EU was seen by many as a pragmatic choice. We saw it realistically because we approached the decision situationally, right? Because we believed it would further our economy. Whereas in this situation, many MPs wanted to remain because we believed, and we looked at the decision situationally, right? And we believed that it was the most realistic thing that we should do. We should stay within the EU bloc, right? So that, chaos doesn't occur, as some may say. However, after the public voted leave, right? Many would argue that's not necessarily a of course, we had to follow. The government has a democratic mandate to follow what the public say. So I feel like it literally went against tradition, and which has caused, many would say, a lot of economic chaos that has occurred from that specific decision because we deviated from tradition. I don't know if you guys understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but okay. I think where like the clash of thought has occurred is that to me, the tradition is conserved by like the people that the conservatives, like those in power, like those that are governing that conservative idea, right? So, and their expectation was that the people who follow them, or like along across the people they're governing, they would conserve that idea as well and vote Remain. But what I've been trying to say is, since they didn't and they voted Leave, which to them was unexpected and not traditional, they didn't know how to go about it because all they think because okay, like in the first instance, conservatives have to be voted into power in the first place, and so David Cameron at the time, he was been voted into power, yeah, and when people, so like whoever's voted into power, and he's pushing that yes we should vote Remain, but I'm going to put it to the UK population where I've been who have voted me into power, must I like to add, and I'm saying we should Remain, but everyone else can have a choice, and then everyone's voted Leave. Like the tradition you've been trying to conserve, which is like I think we joined the EU like 1970, like around that time, like it's now challenged. You don't that's not something you're expecting, and hence why he resigned straight away because he didn't know how to handle that. That was not what he was expecting. That didn't follow the tradition that he'd been introduced to.
Yeah, if I'm being completely honest, I still don't understand what your counter argument is.
Same.
Because you're essentially saying because he looked at it traditionally, he wasn't prepared. But
Same.
either way, there's nothing that could have changed in that situation. It still would have turned into an economic crisis either way. Even if the conservatives wanted to leave and have a more ideological change, it still would have turned out to how it is today.
By
Yeah,
your definition of what you provided to me today as like what conservatism is, they wouldn't have wanted to leave, is what I'm saying. You're saying they would have.
Yeah, they wanted to remain.
Yeah, so they wanted to remain. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. The idea of tradition being conserved. Yeah, and would you agree that staying in the EU was tradition being conserved?
I
Mhm.
don't know. To me,
Yeah,
I don't
so
really know if conservatives wanted to remain. That's per se. It's very, I would say each to their own. 'Cause
No,
you don't
okay.
really know.
Let me just explain. Right. So So in terms of the new right, a lot of people wanted a hard Brexit, and this is where we come to the more socio-moral aspect of conservatism. In terms of the new right, the neo-conservatives, they wanted to leave because they wanted British sovereignty. Because in their sense, tradition was to keep British sovereignty. They didn't believe that the actual decision to stay within the EU was traditional, right? Whereas the more one nation conservatives, like David Cameron, Theresa May, they wanted to remain because they believe tradition. They essentially took pragmatism. They took pragmatism over. They took pragmatism over British sovereignty in this case. So I guess in this case there are differing views on whether or not tradition should be uh, put over pragmatism. But I feel like in this case we're talking about specifically pragmatism, and therefore we're talking about the more one nation concept of the fact that we should be looking at things realistically, and also the fact that they would believe that since traditionally, if we look in the past, us staying in the EU has worked. What's the point of leaving, right? So I feel like, yeah, there's definitely factions within the conservatives that believe certain things, 100%. But I think right now we're just talking about specifically the decision of whether or not to leave. But right now, it's not really the argument in itself isn't. It's not. It's more about the decision of leaving the EU, whether or not it would have been better to leave or not to leave, and whether or not it would have been to, conserve the tradition quote unquote, of us staying in the EU versus leaving? Because I'm just trying to really understand what Faiz is trying to say in terms of, okay, yeah, he wanted to conserve. Cameron wanted to conserve the status quo. What situation we're already in by remaining, right? And the whole thing I'm trying to say is the fact that we went against it kind of goes against the whole pragmatism thing, which I'm trying to explain, as in, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. He wanted to conserve, and he failed in conserving the tradition. But at the end of the day, many people would argue that if he conserved the status quo, if we remained in the EU, it would have been a better decision overall. So I'm just, and also to comment on your your trial method of testing different ideas. I don't really see how that would work at all, because how are you supposed to implement an entire different society each, I don't know, every, I don't know, 20 years or something? Like that's not gonna work. That's not practical.
Yeah, to be fair, in actuality, it's not very a practical idea, but in principle, is like more where I was looking at it.
It's not very practical towards me. I just feel like
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're just going in circles with this argument.
yeah, I feel like
We-
the government.
Wait,
It's not, so if someone wants to do like this trial and error like that, I don't understand how the government can actually shape. So I don't really,
Yeah, but to be fair, I have said, like it's more of a in principle thing, because we are talking about political theory and ideology. So, like in principle, is more where
yeah,
we're
but you also have to take
Obviously,
into
yeah,
consideration the practical sense.
yeah, I know.
yes, I don't really understand if a political theory. Yes, theories can be, I don't want to say stupid, but to me, theories can be, they may not always work, but they have some, sort of, let's say, involvement in like politics today. But I just feel like your whole method of trial and error will almost be a disaster. Literally, look at Kwarteng, the old ex-chancellor, with his mini budget scheme. Probably he was thinking trial and error, and look what happened to him. He lost his job. So I don't think this whole method
No,
of
I
trial.
highly doubt that Kwasi Kwarteng was thinking trial and error would be the new model.
Possibly, because what was he thinking?
Okay, I feel like
But
this whole trial and error.
Faiz as well, but
So I think this whole
Faiz
trial
as
and
well.
error thing kind of just takes away from the argument, to be honest. Because the trial and error thing, I mean, it's not really. I don't
It's not
really know
practical.
any.
It's not practical.
I don't
I
even
don't
know
know
an
anyone that
ideology that even suggests
has
that.
trial and error. I don't even know anyone that would do trial and error. That's why I'm confused.
No, I'm not saying Faiz is wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong, Faiz.
No, I'm not saying he's wrong. No one. You cannot say he's wrong because it's a theory he's suggesting.
Yeah,
But I don't
100%.
know. You can never say he's wrong. But I would love for Faiz, the theory you're suggesting, right? What is the name of it, and who is actually backing that theory?
It's called Faiz's political theory, and it's going to start in 2050.
Anyways, I feel like we'll go. Let me just. I don't know. Do you guys think I can talk about some neoliberal thinkers, and you guys can or do you think we should end it here? It's up to you.
Some neoliberal thinkers, and we can have our little debates about it. Because I think we're having a great debate here, and I think we may decide, we may think differently. You know what I mean? We may
We're closing in on 1 hour.
we may think differently, but I still think we can have a good debate. I think you can mention a neoliberal thinker. We can have a good debate, honestly.
Okay.
Well, Charlie, it's been a brilliant debate, and I thoroughly enjoyed having you on like today. But this is looking to be our longest episode. So
yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could push it, but
give us one, Uche. Give us one. I would love to hear.
Okay, I'll give us one, and I want Daniel to talk about it because he's been too quiet. He's been way too quiet. I'm sorry, but all right, I'm just gonna give this neoliberal thinker. Her name is called Ayn Rand. I think that's how I pronounce it. Yeah. So she I mean, she doesn't blatantly come out and say, okay, she's a conservative. She more sees herself as a radical free market. She just promotes, the free market, right? So, but a lot of people class her as a neoliberal. So her philosophy is called. So she has two different elements to her philosophy. One is called objectivism, one is called ethical egoism. So objectivism is basically the concept that through the application of rational and logical thought, it's possible to create, or I mean, it's possible to determine absolute truths and design a perfect society. So she would basically believe that because humans are rational, we can create a perfect society, and we don't need to necessarily look at tradition to think of that. And her the second building block to her philosophy is called ethical egoism. So essentially, what that means is that she believes it's morally correct to be self-sufficient and self-interested individuals. She believes to care that you should only care about yourself and people within your family circle. And she believes that if you don't, and you also care about people outside your family circle, then she actually argues that this is perverse. So if you combine these two concepts, right, this is why she advocates for the free market, as in her view, and she believes that if society ran with these principles, then it would lead to the most creative and innovative society possible. And she believes that any type of state intervention would lead to a stifling of creativity and innovation. It would cause a grey or dull society, essentially. She believes that the
Sorry, what's her
individual,
name?
her name is Ayn Rand.
Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
Well, I think Ayn
I-
Rand is personally I've never heard of her. Don't think she's too
Yeah.
significant. I think she is pretty
I
much
mean,
saying,
I mean,
hold
she
on,
is,
hold on,
but
hold on, hold on, hold on. I think she is pretty much saying, be selfish in society and you'll do well.
yeah.
And arguably, I think the people know, be selfish in society and you do well. But is that ethically correct, morally correct? No, obviously it's not. But people still do
But
it.
how do you? But why is it obvious?
Obviously it's not, because how can one be selfish in society and maybe you're playing devil's advocate, I know, but I don't even need to give out an example of fact. Someone being selfish is obviously morally incorrect.
Yeah, but that's in your view. Why does like?
Okay,
Why does it have to be
okay,
morally?
okay,
Because
okay,
as in,
okay. You can defend selfishness at some stages, right? But let me give you an example, right? A business, okay? Amazon. Amazon operated in many countries of the world, okay? The pollution they release from what their little factories they have across the road, all of this, right? They
Mhm.
don't care. Jeff Bezos is in his office caring about that. All he's caring about is making his money, his profits. Yeah, you see where I'm coming from here.
Yeah, I
Can
get what
can
you
you
mean.
can yeah, but can you then tell me what he's doing is morally and ethically correct? No.
Well, maybe not in my view or in a
But
lot
in
of
his
people's
view,
view.
he cannot tell me that his view is ethically or morally correct. He knows he's doing it to be selfish. And what's the thing you call it? Ethical egoism. That is what he's doing. But
Yeah,
there is but
and
and it's not ethical egoism. So Amy, what's her name? Amy Rand? What do you say her name is?
Ayn Rand.
Ayn Rand is talking absolute nonsense, because there's no such thing as ethical egoism. It's either unethical egoism or pure selfishness.
Okay, I think you need to open your mind a bit. I think you need to open your mind. I don't. Okay, so I feel like the reason why she would argue that caring about other people is unethical is because she believes that the best society is a society in which people think in their most creative and innovative way. And in order to think in that most creative and
Oh,
innovative way, you can't have limitations on your liberties. Because if
oh,
you're caring about what other people think, you're not gonna be thinking about what's the best way I can do this thing, right?
no. Caring about other people is unethical. Okay, guys, Faiz, Uche, Daniel, listen to this. Caring about other people is unethical. Have you heard that right? Can everybody confirm that they've heard that
What do
right?
you, Daniel? What do you think about
Let's
this?
approach this in a more
Personally,
open-minded. It's theory.
yeah. Personally, I feel like what's it called? It's just the way that it's phrased that's really getting there. But I feel like as like creatures that we are, we should pursue our own self-satisfaction, our own utility, and our own interests above all others.
Yeah,
And from there, trickle that down to people that we're close with, and then what's it called? And then that's about it. We shouldn't really go out of our way
Yeah,
to really
yes.
help the next person down the line, the next person down the road. And as logical beings that we are, and rational beings that we should be, we should prioritize our own survival and our own
Yes.
interests above all else.
Yes, yes. But what Amy Rand is trying to say is that everyone should be like that. So imagine a society where everyone was like that.
Yeah, but
Think
if
about
it's
it. Think about it now. In
That,
this
that's the free
society,
market.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the free market.
yeah.
no, but
I suppose if everyone was like that, to be fair, it would be kind of utopic in a way, because if you sort yourself out first and then have the ability to sort other people out, eventually everyone's looking after another whilst making sure.
But she argues that you shouldn't look after another.
yeah, that's exactly what I'm
everyone's looking
saying.
after
No.
themselves.
Faiz
Everyone's looking
again.
after themselves. Everyone's okay. Like,
Faiz again.
oh, okay.
Faiz, right? Listen to this, right? Again. You've said, right? You said.
Are you okay? Are you right? Because
No,
I'm not really saying your point.
I'm trying to work this out, right? Faiz again has said, Amy Van, right? So everyone should, work for themselves, focus on themselves, and then after distribute to other people. But Ayn Rand is not saying that. She's saying this is what
I understand that. But even if everyone's looking after themselves, yeah, and then everyone's okay, is that a bad thing?
But then how is everyone going to be okay from looking after themselves? There's people that come from disadvantaged backgrounds. We know this. We've discussed this earlier in this podcast. We've discussed this earlier in this podcast. So I'm just trying to understand the view. Like, your view is to say that ultimately, what you're trying to say is that, because to me, I do believe in hard work. If you work hard, you're going to be successful. But there's some people that literally, with all the hard work they can do, they cannot go somewhere without aid, right? So really, you're trying to say, and what this Ivan is trying to say, is that money grows from trees. Because you told me that, and also I think
Whoa. Before we go into any argument, I'm just gonna say,
I think you ran away from man's point.
Everything that we say here.
Okay.
Everything that we say here is not really for us to push our personal agenda. All the things that we say, right, are just us having a discussion. It's not necessarily
just a discussion. 100%, guys. Disclaimer.
So like you saying, what you believe is not necessarily true. It's just a discussion to be had.
Yeah.
Ooh. Anyways,
viewers.
I think that was a good debate.
All the listeners out there, right? Disclaimer: we're not pushing any views. We're just having an open discussion, right?
Yeah.
And it's open discussion. With open discussions, I always want people to understand. The main reason, like Rand is saying that everybody should be purely ethical egoism, and push that. I don't think Rand is not saying that once you focus on yourself, you distribute the wealth to other people.
Sorry to cut you off. I just got the alert that we need to start wrapping this up. It's touching 1 hour 40 minutes.
Yeah. Anyways, so
it's a long episode.
It was a very long episode.
If you stay to the end, right, you've had you listened to a cracking debate, cracking argument. I think we're not pushing any bias here, but I think it was a great chat, a great discussion for you, Uchi, Daniel. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Thanks, Chad, for coming on to this episode. We loved you here, mate. Honestly.
Obviously,
great contribution.
Again, disclaimer: we're not pushing any views, but we're just having an open discussion. As young, future, you could argue leaders, future, successful, hopefully successful, or praise to God, successful, people, in society. We're just trying to, we're still quite young. We're still just trying to push our, understand and discuss views of political and philosophy. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100. So thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.
It's been a long episode. So
it's been a long episode for you, right?
It's been a bit of a clash,
Yeah.
But,
what? I love it. This is what I live for. Having these debates, having these.
Yeah, 100%. Did he just leave?
Yeah, I believe so. That's all good.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
we should just wrap this up. Thank you guys for listening.
So it's an economic episode next, so watch out for that.
We
and
may actually
no,
have a guest. Actually,
Oh.
I've had someone ask to be
Brilliant.
on it. So, but yeah, if anyone wants to be on it, shout us on LinkedIn or yeah.
Thank you.